Hello, ladies. We're going to talk about set theory. Um, CH is true here. The handsomest man in the world couldn't quite make it, but I was checking my videos and the stats and the data, and I saw that I'm not getting quite the female viewer, the number of female viewers I would want, and I figured this probably isn't the way to do it. So those of you who want your money back, hey, this was free to click on, so there you go, you can have it. However, actually, I do have a reason that I want more female viewers, and it's not the obvious thing that you're thinking. I'll probably put this in comedy just to make it okay. The actual reason I want more female viewers is that often set theory, mathematics, and analytic philosophy tend to be very much of what you might call white male preserves. And to me, that denies the perspectives of a number of worldviews that can contribute. In other words, oftentimes certain ideas that are cultural notions of Western man or Western Europeans and American males, they're actually rather limited notions, are taken to be the sum totality of truth. I think Paul Feyerabend discussed this when he talked about the idea of dominant hegemony, and this has been touched on by various philosophers. But I think we need to broaden this. Okay, so I obviously the handsomest man in the world couldn't make it, but I hope you do enjoy this conversation anyway. Let's bust out the chalkboard of love here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And for those of you who were unfortunate enough that this was your first video, I'm discussing the continuum hypothesis, and I'm continuing with the theme of, and you can watch my previous videos on it, a case for the continuum hypothesis, so you have some kind of background with this. But I'm discussing a theme that of the idea of 0 times infinity, and what exactly is that, and how it is that 0 times infinity, whether it's 0, whether it's not 0. I maintain as my axiom that 0 times all, if not, of course, is 0. That's obvious, but that it's not so obvious when we talk about higher levels of infinity, whether we can even discuss 0 times that higher level of infinity. You're going to have to go back to the previous videos to really discuss that. I'm just going to sort of elaborate on the idea of the null set, and we're going to talk a little bit about the axiom of infinity. The null set obviously would be the set that includes no other set, or the set that includes no set, really. It wouldn't, we could say the set that includes no other sets, but technically, really, the null set would be nothing. So it would be paradoxical to say the set that includes no other set other than itself, but that is kind of how we would define it. But in P&O arithmetic, we would generally define 0 as being the null set. I think that's problematic personally, but here we go. We're going to use the standard idea, and then we have the singleton of the null set, or the set the set of the null set, which would have one member, and so we would generate 1 from that. Now, below here is where it's a little bit controversial. We have the nullity of the set of the null set representing 0 times 1 equals 0. And, I'm not going to argue that. But notice that there is an assumption that's made here that, again, is kind of a very Western assumption. It's a very, it's an assumption that you find a lot in Western philosophy. And the assumption is that there's a duality, okay? In this case, there's something, i.e. a non-zero number, and then there's nothing, in which is being defined as 0, and that these are opposites, and that we assume off the bat that taking the nullity of a set will just give us the null set, okay? If you think about it, that's not so easy to assume, because if we have the nullity, if we have let's say a set of all apples, okay, and we take the nullity of that, we have no apples. But do we have the null set? Okay, we just have no apples. What about oranges? What about grapes? What about tangerines? Obviously, in mathematics, we assume that we have the non-zero, and then the zero. We'll leave the infinite out of it for now. Just say the non-zero finite and then zero. And that's assumed, but that's assumed because it's true in arithmetic. Is it really proven? And I would say, I agree with the assumption, but I mean, it is an assumption. My axiom posits another way of looking at it. It's not that I'm refuting this, it's just that positing another way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it would be that, again, we have, let's bring up the world's sexiest chalkboard again. We have the null set, okay, or we'll just call it, we'll just equate the null set and zero for now. We're not going to challenge that one at this point. We have the null set, okay, and then we have the set of the null set. But if we take 0 times 1, you can almost think of it as if you're taking off of you're taking the singleton off, and you just have the null set. Okay, in other words, this can be thought of as erasing the singleton, because otherwise, if you think of it as anything other than that, what if I had the nullity of the null set? Well, 0 times 0 is equal to 0, but in some sense, are you denying the null set, in which case you're taking away 0? But if you just assume a duality here, you would have something non-zero. And yet in arithmetic, we know that 0 times 0 equals 0. We don't question that. So I'm willing to posit that what we're actually doing is taking the singleton away. We're denying the capacity to do this. Because again, I discussed the idea of the 0-1 dichotomy, which in a sense you see here, the 0 is just without the singleton and the 1 is with the singleton. Okay, and that if you were to, well, I mean, it's just plain and evident. If you were to take the nullity of the set of the null set, you would just get the null set again. Yeah, I know it's a little, personally, I consider it a little bit problematic to equate 0 with the null set. I'm just going with what I see in number theory as it's been constructed. Okay, I don't happen to personally view them as being the same thing. But, if we follow that line of reasoning and we look at, we take the axiom of infinity and we take the null set and we then have the singleton of the null set and we continue on and generate numbers up to all if not. What about all if 1? What would all if 1 be? All if 1 would transcend the whole 0-1 duality. It would transcend any kind of discrete reality. So could you talk about 0 times all if 1 using that system there? So I hope this has been an exciting discussion of set theory for those of you who may be new to it. I understand that you may not quite understand the concepts that we've been discussing. But for those of you who are familiar with it and do enjoy it, I invite you to look at some of my previous videos, and hopefully hopefully the handsomest man in the world will show up at some point. We won't hold our breath. Thank you.